Good afternoon. My name is Calmeister. I filmed this afternoon because this corner usually gets beautifully lit by the sun, and it's actually just overcast and cloudy and icky and gray and going to rain. Probably not, but it's really flirting with the idea of raining. Anyway, I've never read The Hunger Games. And the story is The Hunger Games, the first book, came out in America, where I live, in 2008. And so I was an 8-year-old when this first book comes out. And despite being a reader, it really was not on my radar, given its content and my age. And so the movie came out in 2011 or 2012. I know I saw it in 2012 because I was a 12-year-old and I was thoroughly uninterested in seeing these movies, right? Because I had friends who read the books, but my mom was like, "You're not supposed to read those because that's kids killing kids." Because that's what Focus on the Family told her about these books. And so, of course, Focus on the Family, their word is law. And so my childlike wonder and like behavior was I was in competitive soccer. I was a little 6th grader competitive soccer girl. And so me and a few teammates of mine, piled into some mom's minivan, and we drove 6 hours across the state through the mountains to go play a soccer game. And so us all being 12 and 13-year-old girls with nothing to do, there was 5 of us. So me and 4 of my teammates in this minivan. And guess how many of us brought a DVD? One of us decided bringing some DVDs might be a good idea for a 6-hour trip with teammates we just met. Not only was like 5 of us in this car to entertain each other for 6 hours plus, we did not know each other. So we were not about to be a group of 12-year-old yappers. The 2 movies my friend brought with her for this trip were I Am Number 4 and The Hunger Games. And my preconceived notion of Hunger Games at this point is violence, murder, death, and it's all children doing it. And being a child myself, not interested. I was scared. This movie was PG-13, and I, being a 12-year-old goody two-shoes at the time, I was like, I can't watch PG-13 movies. I can't watch a PG-13 movie because I'm 12. PG-13, you have to be 13. That's the way the world worked in my little brain. So I called my mom in the mountains and said, the movies are PG-13 and I'm just not old enough. And here I am expecting my mom to be my scapegoat. I was expecting her to be like, Callie, you're not allowed to watch those movies. Thank you so much for calling me. And then I would have had to look my teammates in the eyes and thought that this was appropriate for the time. I was going to look my teammates in the eyes and be like, I'm not allowed to watch them, so we can't watch them because I was scared, okay? Again, I was the thought of being thrown into an arena to kill other children, this is what sheltering your kids does. Makes them paranoid as fuck. Anyway, we ended up watching I'm Number 4 first. I handled it, and I was like, that was actually kind of a fun movie. Maybe I can handle The Hunger Games, because also we had like 4 hours left in this trip. And so I sucked it up. I watched The Hunger Games. And then I promptly had so many nightmares that night, did not sleep. So, I was thoroughly traumatized by the Hunger Games movie in 2012. And so I decided that I was never going to read these books because the movie traumatized me so hard. The books would be crazier, right? Catching Fire comes out, Mockingjay's Part 1 and 2 come out. And I saw the Mockingjay ones in the theater. It was 2017 when, I forget which one came out in 2017, but one of them did. I remember liking the movies. I actually recently rewatched the movies. I love the movies. And usually as a bookish person, I have always been a purist and you should read the book before you see the movies. And because I had seen the movies, I figured I will never read these books because how can a book be entertaining if you know everything that's going to happen? And then last year, I'm pretty sure it was last year, Miss 2024, or maybe was it 2023? I forget. They're all the same at this point in my life. I'm getting old. So Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes came out, and I was like, this is so good. Maybe I should read the books so that I can read the book version of this, because this movie is so, like, it's missing some stuff. I can tell. And so my friend, who was obsessed with the Hunger Games as a child, of course had the copies of the books, and I said, please let me borrow them. And she said, yeah, you can read them. And so in honor of Sunrise on the Reaping coming out today, I'm a little bit late with my video upload schedule because of my podcast shout out. It's a place for us to yap. It's a place for me, a certified yapper, to yap even more. But the book comes out today. We're still on a decent enough timeline. Again, in honor of Haymitch's Games, the book Sunrise on the Reaping coming out this year, I'm gonna read the Hunger Games for the first time ever. I have the books. They're the black covers. They're all pretty. I did obviously already start tabbing this book because I've started reading it. I'm about 120 pages in so far. Get away from the chips. Sorry, my cat is, I have the chips guarded now over here because he is trying to eat them. They're mine. The first few things I noticed, it is an incredibly eerie experience. This motherfucker is going to be the end of me. It is an incredibly eerie experience to know what the movie's about, know what happens in the movies, and be reading everything from one person's perspective. Like, we get to know a lot about Katniss in the movies, and like they are pretty like limited to her perspective. Like, we don't usually go outside of what Katniss knows within the movies, but these books, like when you're in Katniss's head while these things are happening, it's, I don't know, it's like, I did this comparison to my friend the other day and she was like, you're gonna get canceled for that, and I'm still gonna say it out loud. It's like if you read a book that talks about Anne Frank's diary, and you're like, you're learning about Anne Frank and her life, and it like references her in her diary, but it's not like, it's like a non-fiction sort of recount of Anne Frank and her life plus excerpts from her diary talking about her diary. Like, that's the movies. And then if you take that recount, but you actually read the diary and you're just reading Anne Frank's diary, that's these books. Does that comparison make sense? It's like reading a recount of an event from history versus someone's like first person experience of that thing in history. Honestly, I think it's making my reading experience better, considering that these books are written very young. Basically, anybody who's old enough to be in the reaping, that's the age group that these books were written for. So a few things I marked early on. I feel like a lot of people talk about this, where at the beginning of the book, Katniss doesn't want to have kids. And it's like, that's a big part of her just like knowing that the world sucks. People promising to protect Prim. The whole point is to protect Prim, make sure Prim stays alive. Everybody in District 12 loves Prim. Prim is like a huge central figure to the book. And I've seen plenty of analysis to know, obviously, Prim being a center of this whole book and the whole series and everything that happens, that's intentional for Katniss's story. And I'm not going to spoil the ending in case you don't know it, but a lot of people do know what happens to Prim. So the part I'm at right now, page 125, is when she shoots the apple out of the pig's mouth. So still an epic scene. There's these little parts where like her and Peeta are talking to each other and they're cracking jokes with one another. Things that like they skip over at the beginning in the movie, obviously because it's a movie and they're trying to get to the exciting parts faster, and also because if you adapt every single scene in this into a movie, it's going to be like 6 hours long. So a lot of the stuff that was cut for time in the movie in the beginning of this book is very interesting, like her and Peeta's relationship when they're training and when they're learning from Haymitch and when they're like talking to each other, technically talking to each other for the first time. And then the other thing that's interesting to me is Katniss's like perspective of everything is incredibly blunt. It's like, suddenly I'm furious that with my life on the line, they don't have the decency to pay attention to me, that I'm being upstaged by a dead pig. My heart starts to pound. I can feel my face burning. Without thinking, I pull an arrow from my quiver and send it straight at the game maker's table. I hear shouts of alarm as people stumble back. The arrow skewers the apple in the pig's mouth and pins it to the wall behind it. Everyone stares at me in disbelief. This makes me feel this thing, and then I did this thing because this thing made me feel this thing. It doesn't linger on her emotions and like revel in them. In her head, it makes sense. She's like, I know I was being irrational, but like, what else was I gonna do? And so I like the very blunt writing. Obviously, it's simple because it's for children, but I think that the bluntness kind of, it never shies away just from how horrible the games are. Another weird little foreshadowing thing I realized was the scene when they meet Rue. They're throwing spears for the first time. And I was like, how did Rue die? That's kind of the first thoughts. I like all the little pieces of them hanging out and like seeing the training and all of that happening like before we get into the games. Like I said, in the movies, they skip a lot of this stuff. So this is new to me. I've analyzed those movies before. I am a film person. Like I went to film school. Sitting down with the book and just kind of playing a compare contrast game of like what the book accomplishes versus what the movies accomplish. The book gets you that experience where we're in Katniss's head and we're watching everything happen. And then the movies, obviously we have to actually see it and witness it the same way the Capitol does. And so it's interesting how each medium really plays into itself and getting to like the point of the story because of it. Anyway, we're 100 pages in. This is a reading vlog, so you will get to watch me read, which is so entertaining. So I just finished the first book of The Hunger Games. See, I'm really bad at gathering my thoughts immediately after finishing a book or a piece of media. So I guess I'll go off of like initial feelings. Like, it's really good. This is one of those ones where, I get the hype. My dumbass teenage self was just so hell-bent on being the most unique person in the world that I really just could not read this book. I can't help but compare it to the movie, right? Because I saw the movie first. I have a very physical manifestation of them. Like usually when I'm imagining books, it's more vague and dreamlike in my head, whereas when things are happening, I'm seeing the movies in my mind's eye, I'm seeing what it looks like, hearing Katniss's voice. I also tend to be a very anxious reader, especially in a high stakes world like this. It improved my reading experience a little bit because I wasn't anxious because I knew it was going to happen. It's like Romeo and Juliet a little bit in that regard, because I know what happens at the end of Romeo and Juliet, but I still wished it was different. Reading Rue's death, I was downstairs on the couch reading with my friend, and she had just started Fourth Wing, and so she's just making comments here and there about how batshit it is, and I'm sitting there going don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Rue's death never gets easier every time I watch the movie. Now that I've read the book, reading the book, I knowing it was coming was devastating. Anyway, all that said, it's interesting that we never learn how Cato killed Thresh either. He was just so strong and capable that's you can only assume that him and Cato had a really tough fight. And it's interesting when they go over all the deaths in the end, when they're in their final interview, Katniss doesn't linger on it at all and she doesn't really comment on it, so I thought that was kind of missing. But the thing is every time there's something in this book that I'm I want to criticize this, it's I can't help but think it's on purpose. The book is very competent to the point of where I feel the author is definitely smarter than me and making certain judgments on what to tell and what not to tell, to the point of where I'm I am not smart enough to come up with a decent criticism of this book, and that's okay. But a couple things differences from the movie that I distinctly noticed was obviously Cato's death. In the movie, Cato and Peeta and Katniss all have the cornucopia duel, and then Cato is shot in the hand and falls to the dogs, and the dogs eat him, or the mutations. Then they just eat him, and then he dies. In this version, he doesn't immediately die because he has some like sort of armor from like neck to ankle on his body, and he's like a pretty like seasoned and skilled fighter, so he goes out with a bang, right? And he's just like slowly dying at the hands of these mutts. And so Katniss pity kills him with an arrow. She like sees him at the base of the cornucopia, or like the mouth of the cornucopia, and he's laying there like dead, 75% dead, and he just like looks at her and he like groans, and she knows that like this kill is one that's like, at first it was very vengeful, now it's not. It's like a mercy killing basically. And I think that had more impact, I think, than the movie version, for sure, because I think that Cato is this like vengeful, almost evil type of character the whole time. He has no regard for human life, you know, he's brutal, he's terrifying, he's a courier, it's this whole thing. And then like we see bits of his humanity come through. I've always been interested in Thresh's character, just because he's so strong and silent and just as deadly as Cato. Selfishly want this 74th annual Hunger Games, but from Thresh's POV, when he gets called to the reaping, when Rue gets called to the reaping, what goes through his head. I don't know, their dynamic really interests me. Like Thresh being like one of the most deadly characters just because of his like size and probably age. I'm assuming he's 18. And then Rue being the tiniest and the youngest. And I don't know, that dynamic really interests me, and it's probably on purpose. Miss Suzanne Collins is a very competent writer, and more competent than me for sure. Oh, also pacing was really interesting to me because like the book starts kind of slow as Katniss is like doing things in 12, and we're learning about Panem, and we're learning about everything, and then she goes to the games and the pacing picks way up. I noticed too, like when the time jumps, like when she goes to sleep and wakes up, there's no like breaks. Like a lot of books will have like breaks when characters go to sleep, or the next day happens, or there's a time jump. You get a little break between the passages with like sometimes a little drawing. There'll be like a little indicator that time has passed. And I noticed that heavily in this book. She goes to sleep and then wakes up in the next paragraph. Like we don't get any breaks even between chapters really, and time really blends together because of it. And it makes sense, being in the games, that time would blend together so seamlessly. I like what she does with pacing and timing in this book. Before the games, it's really clear, like the days passing, she's doing this, then she's doing this, then she's doing this, and then in the games it's just like it's this like mixture of waking and sleeping and hunting and surviving, and then the games end, and then it becomes like day 1, day 2, day 3 kind of thing. This probably is my only criticism. I do find the ending a bit laborious. It lingered almost too much. I don't know. I think that Katniss's attitude surrounding like love and relationships is really reflective of like young people today. I keep seeing videos online talk about like Gen Z's not having kids, millennials aren't having kids, you know, they're not getting married, they're not having families, and it's like I feel very similarly as a Gen Z adult. I don't really see myself having kids because I don't really trust the world to take care of them, and I don't have the capacity to take care of them in a way that they deserve, if that makes sense. It's crazy how relevant these books continue to be. I remember learning that they were like based on the Roman Empire or something, and that like the games are like gladiator fights. But the more you read them, the more you really do see a lot of these behaviors reflected in the real world, like society. I could probably talk about this for hours, and I have 2 more books to read where I will inevitably have more thoughts. That's the end of book 1. I really enjoyed it. I guess for the end of the segment, the next book obviously is going to be Catching Fire, and I love a sequel because you're just upping the stakes, but you're not done yet. I'm not going to start it right this second. I have some chores I need to do because I've been neglecting them. So yeah, transition. currently at my parents' house sitting. So I thought I would get Catching Fire started. I am about 80 pages in. I'm going to go to the store probably right after this to take care of my sick brother. I'm trying to think if I have any like opening thoughts about this book. Reading it feels like I'm just watching the movie a little bit. Like it's very much like they didn't leave anything out when they were making the movie. The like romance angle is interesting. I don't know, it's a love triangle, and I hate love triangles, but I think that as a love triangle it sort of works, because it's like one guy is like somebody she grew up with and is her best friend, and they were kind of always going to be a thing, and then the Hunger Games happened, which kind of changed her life a lot. Yeah, I was really hoping I could like read a few pages and like have some opening thoughts, but I just don't have any thoughts yet. There's some fun moments, some funny jokes that I liked. But for the most part, the book is it's kicking off. The District 11 thing just happened where she was like, wait, let me give a speech. Like, girl, you should say something. It's interesting seeing how, like, everything this girl does, she's like, I'm doing this because, like, I want them to know that I'm thankful and that I appreciate Rue and Thresh and that there's nothing that I can truly do to, like, save them. So she says all these nice things, but it's seen as an act of rebellion because of the actions of District 11. I think it's interesting too, because I think that even in book 1, Peeta has been very he's had his own little bits of rebellion the whole time. Like I don't think he had a single kill in the Hunger Games other than like the accident with Foxface and the berries. Right before the game started, he was like, I'm not going to let them take who I am away in the games. He's like rebellious in his own small ways where he's being kind. Like his kindness and compassion are like, they really stand out for sure. And I think that, I don't know, it's very, in one way, it's very refreshing to read a story about a man that is like a fully realized character, because I've read way too many stories in recent where like the men are just not full characters. And I think that him being just like so decent and so kind is, I don't know, it's nice to read about a character with unflinching kindness. And I like that a lot. And I think that it matches really well with Katniss's character because she's very passionate, but she also cares very, very deeply for like her friends and family. I'm really enjoying the character dynamics and how they're building on them in Catching Fire. I'm like so excited to get more into the book, but I have like responsibilities I have to do today and I am behind because I decided to read, but I wanted to get started. I'm probably going to read more tonight, but yeah, that is my opening thoughts on Catching Fire. Sure you can see me because I have heaven behind me, but I am about, I think, halfway through Catching Fire on page 226 of 470. The main thing I noticed actually was that like the uprisings in the districts and the like unrest and uneasiness, the like increased peacekeeper numbers and like the fence getting turned on. It has been a while since I've seen the movie, so maybe some of these things did happen in the movie, but I don't remember them happening in the movie. Like the quarter quell happens a lot faster, I think, in the movie. It's also interesting reading it. Like I know what happens in the quarter quell. I know what the stakes become. I kept trying to remind myself that like you're not supposed to read this part of the book knowing what's to come. And so it was weird reading it because I got to a point of it where I was like waiting for it to happen because I was like, okay, yeah, all this political unrest is happening, I get it, whatever, but like I know the quarter quell is about to come and that they have to go back to the Hunger Games. Like I know that that's coming, so like all this stuff just feels like filler. But the thing is that stuff isn't filler because that's like the story. The Hunger Games is not as much of the book of catching fire. Like catching fire is them having to go, and then like the rebellion begins, obviously. Spoilers. It didn't feel very thematic to me, all the different things happening in the districts, because I was like, yep, this is all pretty standard. They're like upping their security. But like, I think thinking back on it now, it's like, if I had no idea, I would be reading this like, oh my God, this district that usually has like no peacekeepers, they can kind of go do whatever they want. They're getting like a lot of attention and a lot of heat right now, all because Katniss and Peeta defied the Capitol. I also noted that she's a lot more rebellion minded in this book than I remember her being in the movies. The like focus on the wedding and her and Peeta's relationship like by the Capitol is really weird to me. I know what it's achieving. People are more focused on romantic entanglements, and it's a good distraction from like what's actually going on. But it just felt like, I don't know. It just felt weird to me. I don't know. The beginning did lag a little bit for me, though. I will probably get back to it. Crazy the way he's like, if it weren't for the baby, bruh. Can you see my eyes? I was thinking I could do my hat like this so you can see my face, but then I look like a frat boy. I literally cannot have my hair out today because it is in desperate need of a wash. I'm out of doors today. It's very nice outside. It's a bit overcast for my personal taste, but that's good for my complexion. I finished Catching Fire last evening. I was gonna film a recap and then I didn't, so that's really superb. Anyway, here it is. I don't know, you see all my tabs. The problem with this one, when I finished the Hunger Games, I had all these different thoughts and I recognized all these themes, and it was just this really surreal new experience. That just newness wore off. I guess I can talk to I think as a sequel, it's really interesting and effective. It's not about another games, it's about what happens next after you defy the Capitol. Katniss and Peeta can't go unpunished, so you read the whole beginning knowing that Katniss and Peeta are gonna have to go back to the Hunger Games. The other thing I noted was like Haymitch's games. They like summarize them in this one, which we don't see in the movie, so I now know how Haymitch's games go. I noticed that Katniss is a lot more like rebellious thought crime. The ending is still very jarring. There is no District 12. It was very good. I did enjoy it a lot. I read it very quickly. There's a lot of great lines in here. Oh, Peeta painting Rue for his test. I'm not sure. I just wanted to hold them accountable, if only for a moment, says Peeta, for killing that little girl. It's getting chilly. Let me just... Katniss and Finnick's friendship is very funny. They just like are throwing insults at one another. Now there's a lot more moments of levity in this book that I really liked. It's crazy that in this games they like were picking them off in days. Like Katniss was like surviving for weeks in the first book. In this one, 2 days pass and they're down to like 8 tributes. They're like, yeah, we're all dead. Girl, it makes sense. It's a small arena and they're all experienced killers. I am going to shut up now, because I'm not saying anything of value, and I'm just going to get into reading Mockingjay. So I finished Mockingjay, and I have a couple thoughts. I don't know how to start this. And because I've been unsure about how to talk about this book, I have been putting off recording this like final segment. I feel like this was a lot of books where you read it and you're like, yeah, self-explanatory. Yeah, it did that. I feel like I have nothing to say. The book already said everything that needed to be said, right? And then I was also getting in my own head thinking, I started feeling like I had like wrong opinions, which crazy for me. Anyway, disclaimer for this video, I'm not going to read the prequels yet. I think I'll do a separate video on the prequels. But something I really noticed in this book is it felt like A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes already existed. There's some moments where like Snow is talking or things are happening and I'm like, oh my god, she knows everything there is to know about Snow. So I did want to comment on that because it felt like the now being in the world where the prequels exist, reading this book makes it feel like the prequels were part of the plan. I like the series and I understand its hype, but I want to talk about like its genre hype a little bit because I think that it's kind of interesting and relevant. Because I was on Reddit today, God forbid, I was on fucking Reddit, and I saw this post. There was like overdone tropes that people are tired of, and this one person said that like they really don't like how the MMC is always leading a revolution, and then someone underneath that was like, yeah, it's just kind of getting really frustrating, like it's like it feels uncreative, the fact that every single author at this point is writing about a corrupt government that needs to be overthrown. And someone else kind of responded and was like, well, that's because like art imitates life and we all kind of feel like we're living in a dystopia, you know. And I was thinking about like dystopian literature like 1984 or, you know, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, the OG dystopians, right? A lot of these dystopians appeal to people during times of unrest, and I think that a lot of people, especially in America, are feeling a very big sense of unrest. Anyway, as I was saying before I got derailed, there's a certain appeal to a young, seemingly unthreatening woman being able to overthrow her oppressive government and being able to have a good man stand by her side to do so. I think that where a lot of romantasy and like current types of work like that get it wrong is she's always with the angry, brooding man that would fully not be on the right side of the revolution in the real world. He can look like that and have a different personality. He doesn't have to be an asshole, right? A lot of literature that people are super obsessed with does tend to follow this trend that Hunger Games really started out. I think Hunger Games was one of the first books to be a dystopian that centered a teenager. Because if I think of like the classic dystopians, the main thing that's have in common is they're about a middle-aged man. It's just a man, and he's doing his job, usually for the government, and then realizes that, oh, maybe the government kind of terrible. Anyway, I think that this book takes those themes that we see in those more bigger, like popular classic dystopians, and it turns them into something that's digestible for young people. Original trilogy it appealed to both men and women, but I think that there's something very telling about it being a woman who leads the revolution. Hear me out. I think that teenage girls in general tend to be underestimated. Teenage girls are very passionate. You're very obsessive and you're passionate, and a lot of them are very, very, very smart. And I think that like there's this certain level of frustration felt by the teenage girl that she is smart and she's capable and she's independent and she has so many thoughts and so many things to say, and she just keeps getting reduced to nothing more than a young woman. People think that they're dumb or they're young or they're naive, and they are in a lot of cases, but they're also emotionally attuned to things. And I think that like making it be a teenage girl that overthrows the government, it resonated with a lot of teenage girls. And making it be a teenager in general, it still resonated with teenage boys. I wanted to comment too that Katniss is a girl with a mouth on her, and I think that she really leans into this trope. But I think that a lot of women in novels now have being a young woman who speaks her mind, and I think a lot of girls relate to a young woman who isn't afraid to speak her mind. As somebody who has shut the hell up way more than I should because I'm afraid of speaking my mind, I get it. I want to speak my mind too, bitch. But I think the thing is with Katniss, she's a little bit bitchy with it. And I think that a lot of people are afraid to add in the unlikable qualities of Katniss into their very opinionated women characters in these books. I was kind of rehearsing what I was going to say here. And I like to make the connection of like Katniss and Freya. I think like Katniss from the Hunger Games and then Freya from A Fate Inked in Blood. That book will keep catching strays from me. where like Freya speaks her mind just because she wants to be fucking annoying, whereas Katniss gets herself into trouble a lot. And like while Freya gets herself into trouble, it feels very contrived. And there also is moments where she like has some decorum. Like she knows that she shouldn't say anything right now. Like he will literally kill her whole family if she says something right now. And so I think that like her having an understanding that like I need to hold my tongue every once in a while is very, I don't know, like there's this nuance to her being able to always speak her mind and have a very strong opinion that we don't get to see in a lot of these stories where they feature women who are a bit mouthy. I think that there's nothing wrong with a mouthy kind of spunky FMC, but I think that it's usually done in a way that mimics what it actually is like to be somebody who's a little bit mouthy. Someone who's mouthy is going to get themselves into trouble. Someone who's mouthy is going to be kind of bitchy. Someone who's mouthy is going to be somebody who not everybody likes. Like I was reading reviews and a lot of people don't like Katniss. I've heard people say that they don't really relate to Katniss. They didn't like her as a character, but they still like the story and like the books. Because I think that Katniss is a fully realized and flawed character, and I think that we don't get to see those flaws in like the mimicked versions of her. I think furthering on that comment and really tied to romantasy again, I don't know, I keep seeing it happen in like our culture, and it feels very, reading these books and like every time I watch the movies, I'm like, oh my god, this is so relevant. Every time I see somebody talk about these, I'm like, it's relevant. And it feels relevant here when we want to talk about things like romantasy. I just commented on how romantasy usually has like an overthrow the government type of thing, but it really tends to focus on the romantic plot lines in these books. And if we want to talk about the romantic plot lines of the Hunger Games, it really clearly likes to utilize Katniss and Peeta, and they're trying to sell this like big romantic plot line of these two characters to society, to everybody. And they're distracting people with the romance between the two of them. And these books themselves are really good at like leaning into some of the romantic elements and distracting you in order to sort of hide the fact that this is about tyranny, babe. And I mentioned this at the end of my talk with Hunger Games, how Katniss is very adamant. She doesn't want to have a family in a world that can't take care of her own children. And she doesn't entertain the idea of ever falling in love and having a family for that reason. And at the end of Mockingjay, controversially, Katniss and Peeta get married and have kids. But they've created a new world where having kids isn't so much not an option. It's the idea that in a world that's better, you have more space to fall in love and explore those feelings. Katniss has had too much going on to really worry about who she's going to fall in love with. And in Mockingjay, because Peeta is like having his brain rewired, we get a lot more scenes with Gale. And I think that this book kind of had people leaning one way or the other with it, was because people who like might have felt slighted by the fact that she didn't end up with him at all, and people who like Peeta were probably mad that he wasn't in the book for very, very long. My friend was telling me this book is really hit or miss. Some people love it, some people hate it. And I think that like if you're really focused on the relationship aspect of this book, you probably are more likely to hate it. But if you actually read the book and recognize what's happening in the book, you probably won't hate it as much. But there's probably other reasons to hate it. I just didn't. And I comment on the romance in this book because I see this type of thing, right? Like it's Peeta or Gale. Love triangles exploded after this in the dystopian genre. People were rewriting this story a million times, yada, yada, yada. And it got reduced even further now, where we have stories about overthrowing dystopian governments, but the main premise is the romance. And we want to read romance in these dystopian societies. I'm not going to totally criticize it. I think that there's a little bit of criticism to be said there, where we're only focusing on the romance when we have bigger fish to fry. But I do think, going back to that Reddit comment where people are like, it's a reflection of the real world. If we feel like we're living in a dystopian reality that we can't do anything about, yeah, sometimes you do just want to know that you can still find love and still be able to have something somewhat domestic and normal in a world that feels completely abnormal. So I can see why romantasy is popular for that reason. I'm not going to fault people for that, but I do think that there's a certain element of criticism that can come here when we talk about romance in a book that centers government tyranny. Because if you're centering too much of the romance in a story about tyranny, then it waters down the tyranny. And I think that like this book does a great job of having the romance really fall to the background so that we can really center what tyranny looks like in the story itself. I did want to talk about Katniss in this book and her decision. If you don't know the ending of Mockingjay, spoilers, but she doesn't kill President Snow. She kills President Coin. There's the idea of Katniss firing the last shot of the war. So like they've taken over the Capitol. They've won. Coin is putting herself into office. And there's going to be this big ceremony where she like is ceremoniously going to shoot Snow with the bow and end the war, end tyranny, end the government's iron fist, all of it. And so it says here, you firing the last shot of the war. What if I miss? I say. Does Quell retrieve it and bring it back to me, or to shoot Snow through the head herself? You won't miss. Gail adjusts the sheath on my shoulder. That's foreshadowing, babe, because she's not going to miss. She's going to miss, but she's not going to miss. She's going to hit who needs to get hit, right? And then a few pages later, we have Snow being like, oh, my dear Miss Everdeen, I thought we had agreed not to lie to each other. He's right. We did. The point of my arrow shifts upward. I release the string, and President Quell collapses over the side of the balcony and plunges to the ground. Dead. And then I wrote on the page right here, can't follow orders, in quotes, because during one of Katniss's like training sequences to get herself into being the people who infiltrate the Capitol, like she wanted to be part of a special squad team, but she had to like do all these military trainings. Like Katniss's big test was whether or not she could follow orders, because her biggest weakness is that she can't follow orders. And what does she do? She killed President Quell instead of President Snow. Oh my God, foreshadowing again. I love foreshadowing. I love foreshadowing. Like, if I could sleep with one literary element, it would be foreshadowing. And that's probably the nerdiest thing I've ever said. Banger. Anyway, I think I'm going to try and wrap this up a little bit. My camera's probably about to die. I was trying to keep this really succinct. I think that the biggest piece of this book, too, that really I found interesting was the idea of the propos, and that like Katniss can't be scripted, and her speaking her mind just from her heart is the biggest piece of the revolution. And I think that a lot of people reading a book like this, and Katniss being like a mouthy teenager who says her mind whenever she wants, I think the appeal of this too is like Katniss's home is destroyed, her family is taken away from her, she's sent to the games, the man she's like in love with is having his brain rewired, so he hates her. There's like so much happening where they're taking so much away from her, but they can't take away her voice unless they slit her fucking throat, babe. And I think that that's something that's very powerful and very resonant in these books as well, is being somebody with opinions and knowing that, you know what, they can take everything away, but they cannot take my voice. It reminds me of the quote from the American Revolution, where the one guy, don't remember his name, he was like, give me liberty or give me death. Like, taking away people's words is like the last step, which I think refers back to something like 1984, where in that book they are actively taking away people's ability to speak. If you're unfamiliar with the premise of 1984, essentially the main guy, his whole job is to go over the dictionary and create simpler words in order to like reduce language and its use. So it says, it was quite simple. All that was needed was an unending series of victories over your own memory. Reality control, they called it. In newspeak, doublethink. His mind slid away into the labyrinthine world of doublethink. To know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which cancelled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them, to use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again, and above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety. Consciously to induce unconsciousness, and then, once again, to become unconscious of the act of hypnosis you had just performed. Even to understand the word doublethink involved the use of doublethink. So, like, instead of saying really bad or hate, they have, like, double plus on good. I'm reminded of that book mostly because, like I said, Katniss's main thing is her voice and her language, and not to be one of those video essayists and bread tubers on the internet, but I keep thinking about literacy and the literacy rate and how a lot of times we're, like, with AI and everything being written for us and having our language actively reduced the same way that SpeakRite is being used in 1984. I find it to be a little bit unnerving as somebody who engages with dystopian literature that like we are watching this happen, and I think that there's a safety to it, right? There's a safety to letting the characters in the story overthrow the bad government instead of doing it in real life. Similar to what that Reddit post was saying, they were like, it needs to stop happening in books and start happening in real life. Somebody like Luigi Mangione, you know, doing something that's big and radical and says something really, really large about the current state of like our healthcare system. What I'm saying is we find a lot of safety in books like this, where there's a person we agree with, we relate to, etc., etc., and they're doing the thing we want to be able to do, and they're risking their life, but there's the safety of knowing that they're going to survive and they're going to win. If I went out and murdered a healthcare CEO and tried to cover it up as best as I could still get arrested in a McDonald's, and like allegedly. Sometimes people have to be willing to biff up their life for revolution, but a lot of people are also too busy turning off their brain while they read in order to process the fact that we're living in a world that doesn't really serve us. People might get mad that Katniss decided to have kids at the end and it's like giving breeder, but I think that the biggest thing that it's giving at the end is that she's finally safe in an environment that allows her to have kids. All that being said, I think that these books stay relevant and will continue to stay relevant as long as we live in a world that doesn't take care of its poor people and its working class and the people that aren't the 5% that are going to the freaking Met Gala. Society is always going to exist. It's always going to be society, and it's always going to be something that isn't going to be perfect. And I think as it's populace, we need to remember the government is a public servant, not the other way around. And I think we also need to engage with art legitimately. This is leading into another topic that I want to explore of like brain off, turning your brain off. But we don't need to be turning our brain off so much. I think that like that's what they want. If we continue to read books that are written by AI or consume Mr. Beast videos in our free time and scroll on Instagram Reels or TikTok when we're not working, then we're just kind of becoming the people in this story that are just invested in Peeta and Katniss's wedding and what dress they're going to wear and how nice it's going to be. And instead of actually engaging with the issues going on, I know we want to forget our issues. And I know sometimes you do need to just turn your brain off and have a little like me time or something. But I think that it becomes an issue when all you're doing is escaping into escapism. I want to read this quote. You can spin it any way you like. Snow thought the Hunger Games were an efficient means of control. Coin thought the parachutes would expedite the war. But in the end, who does it benefit? No one. The truth is, it benefits no one to live in a world where these things happen. I've got a little bit on my soapbox at the end of this video, but I think that I'm going to wrap it up there. If you want to hear me go on more rants like that, more unscripted rants where I pull out my inner Katniss Everdeen, I have a podcast. It is called Girlies Nights. It is over on my HGH Productions channel. So be sure to go check it out there. It's me and my friends. We like to talk about film and media. I leave you with this. Engage with the art that you consume. I like to read a brain off book every once in a while. I was having a meeting with myself where I was like, you know what? I really have been craving something really light. So I think I'm going to read an Emily Henry book after this. But I would implore you to not just read easy literature, easy books with romantic plots and fun and adventure and escapism, because the life you have, the life you're living right now is the time you spend. And if you spend all of your time pretending your life doesn't exist, then you just don't exist. Not everybody has the capacity to do as much as other people. I say just do what you can. I'm very passionate about this kind of thing, and I said I could yap about it forever. Subscribe if you want more videos from me. You can check out my last video, which is me talking about what I read this past winter and what I'm currently reading this spring. So check that out if you want to know what I'm currently reading. You can also check out my Goodreads, which will be a super accurate representation of what I am currently reading. I have a Pinterest and an Instagram, not super active, but you can follow it to feed my vanity. Like I said, I have a podcast if you want to check it out. It's on a separate channel. I'll link everything down below. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for me to read the prequels. And that's all she's got for you today. That's all she has. Thank you, and good night.